572-0383 and 572-0215. Rev-Up St. Lucia, the alpha of radio.
Doctor in the House is brought to you with the compliments of La Place Salaison, Ultramart, the Library Cooperative Credit Union, and Tapio Hospital.
At Tapio Hospital, caring and competent obstetric consultants who will see you safely from prenatal care through delivery with a team of excellent pediatric and anesthetic support. Tapio Hospital, where the patient safety comes first.
At Library Cooperative Credit Union, we have one simple goal: to help you grow. Because when you grow, possibilities expand. We're about growing wings, growing ideas, growing you. This is your time. A time when your plans and dreams fall into place. When what you thought to be impossible with our support is indeed achievable. And best of all, it's a time when you can look back and see your growth. So, on life's journey, set your goals high. We'll be with you every step of the way. And as you grow, so should your opportunities. Library Cooperative Credit Union. We're not a bank. We're better.
Looking for a one-stop shop for all your grocery and household needs? Look no further than Ultramart. We stock a variety of options from the world's leading brands, all at affordable prices. Whether you're looking for fresh produce, pantry staples, or household essentials, we've got you covered. And that's not all. Don't miss out on our ultra specials and promotions for a chance to win hundreds of dollars in vouchers, hampers, and special prizes. Visit any one of our 4 convenient locations today or check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page. Ultramart, your one-stop shop for all your grocery and household needs. Shop smart. Shop Ultramart.
It's delicious.
La Place Salaison is the true home of quality meat and deli products, selected and priced to suit every palate and pocket. We sell all cuts of meat, poultry and fish, from tasty lamb necks and succulent pork chops to lean dolphin and juicy top round steaks. Our deli items include turkey, ham, bacon, pork sausages, meat patties, chicken nuggets, deli ham and eggs, so that breakfast or that party is a breeze. And for your added convenience, we sell restaurant essentials and grocery items. So where's your next meal coming from? La Place Salaison, of course. La Place Salaison, Castries, Rosalie, Beaufort, and Soufrière.
It's delicious.
It's now time for Doctor in the House, hosted by Dr. Leonard Surage. Dr. Surage, a special good evening to you.
Good evening, Andre. Good evening, listeners. Good evening, viewers on Facebook, Instagram, X, and your favorite 97.1 FM. We are here every Tuesday, and today, Tuesday, the 8th of July, 2025. I have with me in studio a special person, Dr. Gilead.
Gilead, yes.
Right, let me get it right. And he's a psychiatrist, a specialist in psychiatry, and he has been in St. Lucia for a long time. He's St. Lucian, of course, and has been in the South in his more youthful days when he was a general practitioner, and of course also in the North. And so he's a well-rounded person in terms of our social problems in St. Lucia. And psychiatry is very much one of the subjects and areas in demand if you understand our society. So today we'll be talking about childhood development and proper parenting and how it impacts on as a fundamental pillars of harmonious living and a harmonious society. And harmonious society is something that we craving for, especially at this time. You hear so many things are happening and how people cannot get on with people and people are not in sync with people. So I think psychiatry has a very challenging time. So I have with me in studio Dr. Gilead, and I would welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Surage.
Thank you for accepting the invitation.
It's a pleasure.
And earlier on, when I had asked him to come on studio with me, we were talking in his office, and I noticed that he has a passion for the area of childhood development and parenting. It's something I share with him, so that I thought it was an appropriate topic for us to deal with. We have in the past done something like that, but not to the extent to which we may do it. So listeners and viewers, you can call if you have any information to give us, or if you want to contribute to the topic. It's going to be a roundtable type discussion, not a lecture we're going to give, and you'll be surprised how fast the time passes. And you can call us on the landline at 572-9710, or WhatsApp. You can shoot a message at 287-0971. Dr. Gilad, in your long exposure to St. Lucia as a psychiatrist, how do you see the effect of parenting being manifested in young adults and adults?
Well, Dr. Surage, I think it follows in line with what the research shows about the different types of parenting. So if we had to look at the types of parents that we come across on a day-to-day basis, we may have the authoritative parent, one that's firm, very structured, can appear warm. So those parents tend to have what we call the best outcomes, and they link to lower anxiety and depression. Do you have the authoritarian parent? And I think that's a mistake I made here. So the authoritative parent is warm and structured, but the authoritarian parent is the one that's strict. And that one has low warmth. And that parent tends to, that kind of parenting style tends to be linked a lot to anxiety. That parenting style also results in a child who is raised with a low self-esteem and a lot of emotional suppression. So the child fears expressing his or herself because the parent usually shuts them down because it has to be what the parent says. Then there is the permissive parent, which is one which is warm, but there's low structure. So that parent allows a lot from the child. And so the child is raised in an environment where they can be very impulsive. So you usually see impulsive children coming out of there with poor self-regulation, and they tend to get into trouble with school and society at large later on. And then the neglectful parent, that parent is strongly associated with increased risk for depression, anxiety, and a whole host of other mental disorders. Now, there was a lot of studies done in the US on adverse childhood experiences. And yes, there are risks for lots of mental disorders from those. And what I want to point out, first of all, is that persons believe that when we speak about parenting and the outcomes for the child, that we're blaming the parents for the child's behavior or the child's mental disorder, and that's not the intention, because parenting must start with yourself. If you are unable to manage your emotions, if you are able to be present with yourself, you will have a lot of difficulty being present with a child. So if we have to look at the different parenting styles here that I just mentioned, the authoritative parent is one which is very likely very present with the child, very present with self, and is able to self-regulate a lot better than the other types.
So this one will set clear boundaries.
Yes, set clear boundaries. But you see, we always believe boundaries have to do with stuff on the outside. And boundaries must start with ourselves. So if the parent decides, I'm setting a boundary with myself, but I'm not going to shout at the child if something happens, or I'm not going to set firm rules and be perfectionistic and so on. And that parent, if they fall short, then forgives themselves first before they approach the child. Then that parent is able to set boundaries and build better relationship with the child. But if you have a lot of persons who are very hard on themselves when they're raising children, and I think a lot of those persons would have grown up in households where the other parenting styles were present. So those persons raise children, and they very likely would say things like, I don't want you to have the life that I had.
Okay.
That is a huge issue for children. Or I don't want you to go through the difficulties that I went through. So what we're doing here is we're not raising our child, we're raising ourselves.
Yeah.
And that usually does not turn out well, because then we're not being present with the child. We are raising ourselves, so we're not being present with the person that's in front of us. We're trying to deal with our childhood issues through the child.
Yeah. We're correcting our our child issues. Now,
Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You said that the authoritarian parent is not warm. Is that what you said? They're not
Yes,
warm?
they have a low warmth.
Okay. Sorry.
yeah, authoritarian versus authoritative. And I was asking because you mentioned self-esteem, and I think, and we have discussed that in the past, that self-esteem is critical in the way a child, what the child becomes.
Yeah.
And I was happy to hear you mention that the authoritative parent can instill these kind of values in your child. I don't really want to get into the big woods, but I am saying that a parent, how would you describe an authoritative parent? Because by giving examples, because what I am seeing happening is this may be the ideal way to raise your child, because that child will become an adult and it will be a more productive adult.
And would you also explain what you mean by warm?
Okay.
Yes.
So an authoritative parent is one which, first of all, must realize that this child is not who I am when I was a child. And so they have separated themselves from this separate organism. And what they're realizing is that my duty is to raise this little person. And it's a little person, it's not an adult person who is little, because a lot of us make that mistake as well. And so they build a relationship with this person as a separate entity. So it's like somebody who is getting into a relationship with somebody else, and they're getting to know the person. They're getting to, they having the person get to know them, because a lot of us parents don't like to tell our children about ourselves. We think that's not their business and so on. However, the parent leaves the child with space to explore the world, letting them know that I am here, I am your safe space. I'm going to allow you to roam and explore, because the child, every child is curious and wants to build their own perception of the world. So the parent is able to allow the child to explore that curiosity, reassuring the child that I am a safe space for you, and reassuring the child that they can make mistakes and it's okay to make mistakes, and that I will be here for you when, not if, but when you make those mistakes. However, letting the child know that if they sense danger, because they are the adult and they have to put some guidelines, where they sense danger, letting the child know that I see this dangerous thing in front of you, and I don't believe it would be wise for you to go down that road. And if the child decides I want to go down that road, then letting them know that the repercussions from going down that road will not be just yours, but it will also be mine. So that the child is guided accordingly. So it's not saying you not going down there and so on, but having a discussion.
And actually explaining the reason why they do the things they do. And so I think that is the way that I think it should happen.
Yes, but whilst they're doing that, in addition, they have to be aware of fear, because a lot of us feel fear when raising children, because we don't want the child to come out or to have a life that is disadvantageous. So we are not aware that when we are interacting with our children, we feel a lot of fear. We feel a little turning in our stomach, in our chest. We feel our body tense up. So the parent being able to notice those changes and realizing, hey, I'm feeling fear about something. So the child may not be feeling any fear about the situation, but the parent starts to feel fear. And if they respond from that fear, then the situation may not turn out the best. So they have to connect with the fear first, and reassure themselves that I am feeling fear, and I know that the fear is around that. And how can I navigate this situation without a situation where the child gets the bad end of the stick, and then I afterwards am suffering with my child.
Now,
sorry.
Yeah,
I remember
go
I
ahead.
asked you what you mean by warm. How is a parent supposed to exhibit this warmth?
Yeah, so that's just it. So the parent has to be able to maintain connection with themselves so that they're not always lashing out. A parent who's always lashing out and reacting in fear is not warm. That comes across as fearful for a child. So the child has to be reassured that this is my safe space. So it has to be an emotionally regulated parent. And that's one of the difficulties that a lot of parents have, to regulate their emotions. Because let's look at an example. A little child looking at a parent as somebody who's supposed to love me and who's supposed to care for me and who's supposed to be my safe space, and sees a parent coming towards them with a distorted face, screaming and shouting. That is terrifying for any little child. Yes? So the warmth has to be, I'm able to keep my emotions regulated whilst I deal with all the situations that arise from raising that little person. Yeah? I don't know if that answers your question.
Understood.
Satisfies.
Understood.
And I think that is where the self-esteem comes in. I remember growing up, I always felt that no matter what I did, my father will be there to save me. Whether I did something wrong, he might get at me and he might discipline me, but I know he will come to my rescue. And that it was a great feeling to know you had this kind of safe space, as you mentioned.
In other words, he had your back.
He had my back, because and not that I would do something horrendously bad. As a matter of fact, if I was going to do something risky, I wonder what would my father say, and how would he treat me afterward, and maybe I wouldn't have done it. But I think the love, I would say the father's love, is extremely important as part of your own self-esteem. And your self-esteem is the value you place on yourself. Am I right, sir?
So you see,
that's his territory. So
I have an issue with self-esteem because what we know from research is that self-esteem is with you when things are going well, but when things go downhill, self-esteem goes out the door. And then that's why persons tend to self-loathe and all of those things when things are not going right. So there's a different concept that is not something new, and it's called self-compassion.
Okay.
So self-compassion stays with you throughout. So self-compassion is basically, how do I treat myself when things are well, and how do I treat myself when things are not well?
Okay.
So do I treat myself kind on both times? Do I accept that I'm a human and I would feel, anybody who's going through what I'm going through would feel that way? Do I be cognizant of what's happening and be mindful of it and accept that it's going to pass? Or do I hold on to it and walk everywhere with it and woe is me, and before I know it, I've missed out 10 good things that had happened because I'm holding on to that one bad thing that from 2 weeks ago that has happened. And I see that every day in my practice. Persons who beat up themselves because they're going through a bad time, and that is not self-esteem. That is that the self-esteem has gone out the door, and because they're not self-compassionate, they're very hard on themselves.
They're hard on themselves,
yes. If you look at, I'm sure you've come across many doctors, Dr. Surage, who any little mistake that they make, beat up themselves and beat up themselves and beat up themselves, and
they go into guilt phases, etc.
Exactly. So that book, The Four Agreements, states it very nicely. The author says that
4 agreements.
The Four Agreements, yes.
Okay.
So the author says that the human is the only animal that punishes itself 1,000 times for one mistake, and when we finish punishing ourselves, somebody reminds us of the mistake, and we go back to punishing ourselves again, and that is basically self-esteem out the door.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. And also those children who have been raised with what I call proper parenting, the one that maybe the decision they would take in their life will be consistent with them moving forward in life, them progressing, and and being able to work with other people, and being able to share things, and more importantly, they are able to handle their emotions, as Dr. Leonard was saying, that the ability to handle your emotions, etc., and the empathy you have. The lack of empathy causes us to create a lot of harm to other people.
Yeah. But that empathy needs to first be with ourselves. And you spoke of proper parenting, but there's no such thing.
Okay.
Because we are human. And we are not perfect. So in a utopian world, yes, there would be proper parenting. But nobody gave us a handbook when we got somebody pregnant and we decided to become parents. So we have no clue what we're doing. And one of my mentors has a saying that our job as parents is to mess up our children. Those of us who mess them up less are those of us who are more self-aware. Those of us who raising the little ones, raising ourselves again, we tend to mess up our children even more. Those of us who are absent for our children mentally or physically, we tend to mess up our children more. Yeah.
So which parenting style would that one be? The one where we mess up our children even more?
Any of the other three that I mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you to explain again, if you don't mind, the neglectful parent.
The neglectful parent is the one which is, basically not present. So it's a parent, maybe a parent with a mental disorder, who is so consumed by their problems that they don't have time to take care of the child. So it's a child basically that has to raise themselves.
So, meaning what? You said what, that person may be not of sound mind, or that's what you're talking about?
So the person may or may not be of sound mind, but so let's use an example. So a parent who owns a business and spends majority of their time running that business and providing for their family financially and so on, that parent is not present for the child. So that parent, yes, we believe that's how we parent, and we're doing the best for our child, and we setting a foundation for the child, and we providing financially and so on. But then the child is neglected because the child has emotional needs. The child does not feel safe because maybe the child is being raised by other persons who may put the child at risk of other issues going on. And the children then have to raise themselves practically.
So what would the scenario be for a child like that who is left to, basically, as we said, to raise themselves? What how does that look?
Okay, so think of, for example, a small child who has a parent, and the child maybe hardly ever sees the parent. So the child feels alone, the child feels afraid, the child feels unsure, the child does not know what to do, so the child then has to develop some way to cope, some way to remain or to seek connection with that parent that is absent, because the parent is the most important figure in the person's life.
And by the way, if that child is being raised by one parent, because I think you're talking about
two parents,
exactly. So even if one parent is there raising the child, but the other one, as you said, is taken up with work or whatever, we still have issues there, right?
Yes, because the one parent that is there, yes, may be able to provide that kind of support, but then the child will still seek connection with the other parent, and you may see it in the manner of bad behavior. So the parent might be wondering, why he or she behaving so bad all the time? And it is the child seeking connection from the other parent.
So this thing about people saying, well, I was a single parent, I raised my child by myself, and almost feeling proud of it. Is this what a myth in people's minds, that I did a good job because despite the fact that the father wasn't there, I raised that child on my own?
Yes,
and they feel that they've done a good job. I raised a child properly.
Yes, they did the best that they could.
Yeah, right.
So the child alone could tell you whether they about the parent, because it's about perspective. Huh? So the parent may be convinced that I raised an amazing child
According to the parent standards.
But then the child, when they enter my office, it's a totally different story.
Right. Now, these are the children that when they grow up, then they begin to have anxiety issues, they begin to have fears, and that may even stall their progress in life. Because back to your point, there are some illnesses that are not genetic. For example, anxiety and many of these things are issues of upbringing, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, if people, and I know many people who are claustrophobic, they cannot take elevators, they cannot go in train, they cripple their lives. And I suspect many of these things are not genetic, but it is to do with the level of confidence you have in yourself, the way you are brought up, and where you're getting all your emotional needs, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, all mental disorders have what we call a biopsychosocial component to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the biology is very important because most mental disorders have a very, very strong genetic composition, whether it be direct genetics or epigenetics. So direct genetics would be a family member with the disorder or something similar. Schizophrenia, for example, has like 80% of the risk is genetic. Bipolar disorder, 50 to 60%. Anxiety disorder, like
passed
40.
on from parents.
Yes. So there's also something called epigenetics. So what a lot of persons don't realize is that all of us, when our grandparent was 5 months pregnant with our mother, all of us were already inside our mother. So if the grandmother went through something and it was very traumatic for her, then
our grandmother,
it's very likely that some aspect of the gene was changed because the grandmother, because of the protective nature of the parent, the organism would encode what we call an epigenetic tag. I think the most common is what we call DNA methylation, where the offspring, your mother or our mothers, would then develop some gene that would protect her from the thing that the grandmother went through.
So the grandmother got the
trauma.
And it translated into her genes.
Yes.
And when she has the child, which is my mother,
right,
then that child
develops
has that gene.
a defense mechanism to the trauma.
Right.
Now in your mother's generation or in your generation, you may never go through that trauma, but the defense mechanism is there.
Okay.
So that defense mechanism then is expressed, and you may not need it. So fear might be something, and pulling away might be something that you don't need, but your grandmother ensured that if anything like that happened to you, you're going to have that ready to take action.
It's like a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the like I said, biology is important, but then we have the social environment. So early childhood trauma, and we mentioned the adverse childhood experiences earlier on. Those are very important because they increase the risk, and they have been shown to be one of the more significant risk factor for most mental disorders. So early childhood trauma, parenting style, so the attachment style as well to the parent and child, bullying at school, a whole host of things, because a lot of the studies that mention adverse childhood experiences don't mention bullying.
Okay.
Yeah, and now substances of abuse are a big thing now that add to the risk of mental disorder. Sorry. So we do have to look at biology, psychology, and the social environment of any person who comes into our practices. We have to look at all of that before we determine why is this illness being manifested, because we don't just treat an illness. We have to know what caused this illness, and then we have to know how do I move forward with this person in treating this illness.
We'll have to take a little break.
Yes.
But when you come back, Dr. Gilead, you spoke about empathy. I would like to know, is empathy something that we come as human beings equipped with? So what is empathy, and are we supposed to teach empathy to our children, and how we do that? So when we come back. Okay, this is Doctor in the House live on Rev-Up St. Lucia, hosted by Dr. Leonard Surage. The program is brought to you with the compliments of Laplace, Carinage, Ultramart, the Library, Cooperative Credit Union, and Tapio Hospital.
Tapio Hospital Radiology Department offers 24-hour service. We provide you with X-ray, CT scans, and ultrasound imaging using the most modern equipment that produces the best images for your medical attention. Call the Radiology Unit at 459-2201. Tapio Hospital, where the patient's safety comes first.
At Library Cooperative Credit Union, we have one simple goal: to help you grow. Because when you grow, possibilities expand. We're about growing wings, growing ideas, growing you. This is your time. A time when your plans and dreams fall into place. When what you thought to be impossible with our support is indeed achievable. And best of all, it's a time when you can look back and see your growth. So, on life's journey, set your goals high. We'll be with you every step of the way. And as you grow, so should your opportunities. Library Cooperative Credit Union. We're not a bank. We're better.
Looking for a one-stop shop for all your grocery and household needs? Look no further than Ultramart. We stock a variety of options from the world's leading brands, all at affordable prices. Whether you're looking for fresh produce, pantry staples, or household essentials, we've got you covered. And that's not all. Don't miss out on our ultra specials and promotions for a chance to win hundreds of dollars in vouchers, hampers, and special prizes. Visit any one of our 4 convenient locations today, or check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page. Ultramart, your one-stop shop for all your grocery and household needs. Shop smart. Shop Ultramart.
It's delicious.
Laplace Salazar is the true home of quality meat and deli products, selected and priced to suit every palate and pocket. We sell all cuts of meat, poultry and fish, from tasty lamb necks and succulent pork chops to lean dolphin and juicy top round steaks. Our deli items include turkey, ham, bacon, pork sausages, meat patties, chicken nuggets, deli ham and eggs, so that breakfast or that party is a breeze. And for your added convenience, we sell restaurant essentials and grocery items. So where's your next meal coming from? Laplace Salazar, of course. Laplace Salazar, Castries, Groselet, Beaufort, and Soufrière.
It's delicious.
This is Doctor in the House live on Rev-Up St. Lucia, hosted by Dr. Leonard Surage. Dr. Surage, it's back to you and our special guest this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for staying on. And have with me, we are discussing areas of childhood trauma, childhood upbringing, and how it affects society at large. And I have with me Dr. Gilead, who is a psychiatrist, and St. Lucian, of course. And we are there discussing different aspects of children, parenting, actually.
I know we tend to call people by the last name, but can I get your first name?
Julius.
Julius.
And I see Dr. Surage didn't bite his tongue now.
Yeah,
okay.
Julius is... so, okay.
So, Dr. Gilead, getting back to my question before the break.
I was just going to
Oh, okay, well, go right ahead
then. And so if you want to make a contribution or you want to make a comment, you can call on the landline at 572-9710, or you can do a WhatsApp message in 287-0971. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yes, okay. So you spoke about empathy, and you spoke about how parents should be empathetic to themselves, and of course, I imagine by extension, showing empathy to the children. So is this something, empathy, that comes naturally in all human beings, or is it something that has to be taught by parents? My parent is supposed to teach me empathy, teach me how to be able to empathize with people, or show compassion, right? And am I supposed to now teach my children how to be empathetic, how to be compassionate, or they just come with that naturally?
Yes, so it can be taught. However, there is a substrate of persons who have difficulty with empathy. So persons with neurodevelopmental disorders, for example, persons with autism, a lot of persons who later on develop schizophrenia, those persons have difficulty feeling compassion and empathy for persons. However, it can be taught. So first of all, the parent has to model it. So the child sees the parent being kind to others, speaking respectfully of others, showing concern for other persons and so on. And so that child models that and develops and may develop empathy. Then the parent has to then develop emotional literacy. So how to name emotions, how to reflect their feelings. So seeing the child feeling or looking sad and letting the child know, I see you looking sad, that kind of thing. So learning to reflect and helping the child increase the words that they have for emotions that they feel.
So if I understand you clearly, you're saying the parent has to be the example of empathy or compassion.
Yes, the parent is
Right.
always the first port of call for the child.
And the child would see the parent exhibiting empathy and compassion for other people.
And the child being observant would pick up things that maybe not directed to them, but they can see how empathy and reasonableness
Yes.
have been applied to other situations, and they watch it.
Yeah.
Interesting. But I imagine that would have been the model that the parents saw
Exactly.
from their parents.
So if
Yes.
the parent did not have that modeled, then they would not have I call it a blueprint to bring to their child.
So what about...
But having said that, I also believe that if the parent were brought up a certain way, they can learn, and if they want to improve themselves, because parents bring you up not knowing what situation you might learn of, so they cannot protect you from everything. But I think that if the parent want to make a difference and want to improve him or herself, they can actually make some changes to in the way they deal with.
And the parent as well can provide opportunities for the child. So if their siblings or neighbors or school, allow the child to help their siblings or to help another child or ask them about school and what happened and if the child says something, asking the child, what do you think about that, or why do you think that child reacted in that way, or why do you think the teacher reacted in that way? So the child is better able to note what happens when I or somebody else behaves a certain way. So the emotional intelligence improves, and that, like I said, has to start with the parent.
So what about a practical situation where a parent literally says to their son, do not bully your sister, do not hit your sister, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Is that also part of the showing empathy and teaching children how to be empathetic, as in addition to modeling that you spoke about?
So you see, saying not to do that may not help. So it's about bringing the child and asking the child, how do you think your sister feels after you exhibited that behavior or you did that to her? You understand? And the child then explains, or maybe the child says, I don't care. Then exploring that further, then you don't care. How would you feel if that were done to you?
Right.
Okay, because we normally say, don't do this, don't do that.
So-
Sorry, Dr. Surage, we have a caller.
Okay.
So whenever you're
Okay.
ready.
I'll take the call.
Okay, all right. Yes, this is Doctor in the House live on Rev-Up St. Lucia with Dr. Leonard Surage.
Hello.
Hey, good evening,
Good evening,
Andre.
sir.
Good evening, Doc.
Good evening.
Yeah.
And we have Dr.
evening.
Julius Gilead in studio.
Dr. Julius Gillard. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for accepting
Talk to
my
me.
call.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay. Dr. Gilead, is it okay? Do you believe as parents we should raise our children in stages? Let me elaborate a little bit. Like the things you will tell your child between the age of 3 and 5 might not be the same thing you will tell him or her between the age of 5 and 10.
Yeah, you're definitely correct.
Or even
because-
expecting. Huh?
So you're very correct, because different ages have different levels of understanding. So for example, a child below the age of 8, 9, preteen there, has a lot of difficulty seeing things from other person's perspectives. So we call it abstract thinking. And the way you speak to a child then. So let's just use that example of setting empathy that we just had. You would have difficulty developing that kind of conversation with a very small child, because the child would not be
between
able
the age of 3 and 5.
Exactly. The child would have difficulties seeing that my sister or brother feels badly when I do that to them, because they're more impulsive then. And one of the things we don't realize is that all children are naturally narcissistic. So for all children, the world revolves around them. And if we have to think of it a little deeper, think of a child in his or her mother's belly. They're being fed, they're just lying there for 9 months, being fed, being growing naturally. People on the outside rubbing them and making nice sounds to them. And then they're born and they're being clothed and fed, and so the whole world revolves around me. So what happens is that whatever I do, it's because it's my world and I'm trying to control it. So whoever speaks to me or tells me to do things, why are they telling me to do things when it's my world? And so the child may be resistant, and that's why you have small children a lot of the time saying no. I'm sure you've heard it. When you tell a child, they tell you no. and that is their narcissistic self responding in a very natural manner to their environment. Yeah, you were going to add something? Sorry.
Yeah, because it's a little difficult to square that circle. Because let me tell you, in disciplining a child, you might end up controlling that child. Now that's where the child can go wrong.
So that's the difficulty, because once the children get to teens, so a parent who was very controlling of a small child, when the child gets to the teenage years, they rebel because that is normal for a teen. The child is trying to control their world and trying to find their place in the world. And anything that looks like it's going to be to control them, they're going to resist it. And that's where a lot of parents have difficulty, because they start to get a lot of fear around the child not doing well and coming out as a bad child and so on. And that is not necessarily so.
Let me finish to allow somebody. Because at the age of sometime between 10, 15 or so, like we try to drop the discipline and take control. And that's why I believe a lot of parents go wrong.
Yeah. It's
because to me there is a difference between discipline a child and control a child. There is a big difference in that.
So Dr. Gilliard, it's a good place to explain. Thank you, caller. It's a good place to explain the difference between a parent who disciplines and one who wants to be in control. Because isn't there a level of control in a sense that this is my home, right? And as long as you're under my roof, you have to do according to what I say. So isn't there always some level of control in all forms of parenting? No?
So you see, Andre, I have a difficulty with the word discipline and control as well, because in my opinion, it's all about relationship. So the focus here needs to be about building a relationship with your child. So if me as a parent, I have a poor relationship with myself, and I have no empathy towards myself, and I have no discipline, and I have no control of myself, then how am I expecting to build a relationship with that child and discipline the child and control the child and all of that, when it has, like I said, the first port of call has to be the parent. So the parent has to do some introspection. Where am I? Who am I? How do I fit into this world? And how do I build a relationship with this little person who I brought into this world? Instead of trying to control that person or discipline them, or all of those words come from fear. Well, because I fear that I'm going to be seen as a bad parent, or I'm going to turn out to be a bad parent, or that my child is going to be a bad child, and then, So
so let's imagine you're a parent, you've done your introspection, you're able to forgive yourself and to be compassionate, right, to yourself. Now you have to parent now. And what would control look like? What does that look like when you're controlling?
Well, there's no control in parenting. Parenting does not have control in as part of it. Parenting has to do with relationship. Yeah?
Right, but we're told that we are trying to control somebody. So what does control look like?
Well, like I said, if you develop a relationship with yourself, there's no need for control. The control comes from us having a poor relationship with ourselves.
But Dr. Gila, that doesn't explain what control means. Just give me an example of how.
So you just want to know what control looks like?
Yes, especially in a relationship with parents and children.
So we have to look at what the parent demands of a child. Yeah. So you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to be a certain way. So it's a lot of haves and needs and musts directed towards the child, and that is where control is. As long as you have all of those words being directed towards the child, then you will have difficulties, because those words tend to cover up an underlying belief in the parent that is very likely based on fear.
So would control be something, I'm just looking at an example. Supposing you slam the door for the house very hard, and the parents say, do not slam that door, but never offer an explanation. Just don't slam that door. On the other hand, you can say, next time don't slam that door because the glass is loose and it might break. Yeah. So try not to slam that door again.
And the better conversation would be, what was happening before you slammed that door? What are you feeling that you felt a need to slam
the
door?
Right, yeah.
Let me give you a little one. You have a child. I want to say child, somebody who's under your roof, okay? And that child wants to live a profligate life, drinking, partying, smoking, that sort of thing. So now you're trying to reach this child with which is not really control. Listen, as long as you're under my roof, I don't want you smoking, I don't want you drinking, etc., etc., etc. Don't bring women into my home. You know, that sort of thing. Especially where males are concerned. Isn't the parent supposed to act like that, to let the child know, you know, that there's certain boundaries because they're in control?
Yeah. So what we have to ask ourselves is, how did we get here? So why did the child decide to drink and smoke and profligate or whatever it is that is happening, that the parent now has to respond from a place of fear? So was the parent being neglectful before? Was the parent being authoritarian before? Was there abuse that the parent didn't know about? There may be a host of things that may have brought us to this situation. So we first have to assess, why is this happening? And like I was saying earlier on, whenever somebody comes into our offices as doctor, we have to ask, what brought this person here? So we don't just say, I treat, because that's what will happen. The parent is now saying, I treat, and I don't know what I'm treating. I'm treating what I am seeing, but I'm not treating what the real issue is, because I don't know
what generated that kind of thing.
Exactly. So we have to know what the real issue is first before we decide I'm treating. So we have to ask questions.
But I'm going to ask a good question. How do we find out?
By asking questions. And
because you may try to communicate with that child who may not be willing to communicate at that point.
Yes.
How does a parent who's maybe probably kind of messed up things already or made things worse, how do you communicate with somebody who probably doesn't want to even communicate with you?
So if the person doesn't want to communicate with you, then that's something you have to accept, and you get help. So you get professional help, you get a friend, somebody who can relate to that child. You seek help, and a lot of persons are very proud and don't want to seek help and feel that they have to deal with this, so I will lock you in the house, or I'll ask the police to threaten you and throw you in jail for 3 days. And that only makes things worse. I remember I saw a gentleman in the prison once, and he was telling me that his criminality started. He was a very hyperactive child, and he has ADHD. And his parent one day took him into the police station and asked them to lock him in the cell. And he says from that day, his whole world shifted.
Wow.
He has not looked back.
Wow.
Yes.
But even more concerning is that the police would actually allow that to happen.
It happens.
Oh my gosh!
I'm sure you've seen the shows on TV where they bring the little children into the prison, and that does not help.
Oh my gosh!
But you understand that the level of quality of parenting and the way the child is brought up. Certainly the first 5 to 6 years of the child's life is critical because that's the time the brain is developing so fast, especially the areas of the frontal cortex where judgment, reasonableness, how to react with emotions, all these are being developing. And if in that first 5 or 6 years of their life, they are not being enhanced and they are not being treated in a manner for them to develop themselves, they can run into problem later on. It might seem...
Dr. Surage, we need more psychiatrists, man. You should go into the field. Just to add to what you say, Dr. Surage, you see, we tend to take that period of life for granted, and even before that. So society has, in my opinion, failed parents.
Absolutely.
Because somebody gets pregnant. How much mental health support do they get?
Nil. Unless the answer is no.
Somebody has a
no
child. How much mental health support do they get? Because nobody knows how to raise a child. Nobody knows. So we have a clue. We're making wild guesses. If I have 10, then I know I raised that one that way. It didn't work. So I tried on the second one and the third one until I think I'm getting it right, but we don't know. So the amount of mental health support that parents get is subpar, and that, in my opinion, is the reason for all the criminality that's going on in the society now. Because
I would support that. Yeah.
And we will get to that criminality issue, but we have a call.
Oh,
yeah, very important. Yes.
Hello.
Good evening, Doc. Good evening. Yeah, it's
good evening, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. You're welcome.
In my call.
Yes.
Yeah. Doc, if a parent has a child, but this parent give up that child, I say, for adoption, huh? Do you believe this child has a right to respect the parent, the biological parent, but this child doesn't have a right to obey the parent?
You're going into something that's even more complicated, and we could spend all night talking about, because you see, there's something called disconnection in psychology and psychiatry, and a lot of the mental disorders we see, and even the behaviors that we see in persons, have to do with the disconnection from the parent. And to give up a child for adoption is one of the ultimate acts of disconnection from your child, because you telling the child basically, I cannot deal with you, and that is the first state of rejection. So they're rejecting the child, and that child develops a lot of bitterness towards those parents, in my opinion.
Wow.
Let's put it on the other side. You didn't give up the child for adoption, but the child is no longer under your roof. The child is living at somebody else's home, whatever. What I'm saying, do you believe this child has a right to obey you?
Well, I cannot tell you that whether I believe or not. I can only speak on the repercussions of that. So any child who is given up for adoption or taken for adoption or whatever it is, that child is disconnected from their parent of origin, and that research has shown has a myriad of repercussions for the mental health of that child, for the relationship that child has with the parent.
I believe a child should only obey the parents. That's my point of view. Should only obey the parents if the child is under his or her parents' roof.
Well, that is debatable, and I mean it depends on the relationship that the child has with their parent.
But you can respect your parents, but that doesn't mean you have to obey your parents if you are not under his or her roof.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay,
interesting.
Thanks.
But that's a whole other debate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but what I would like to, as we are approaching the last few minutes,
I think we can go a little over time tonight because this discussion is so important. Yes.
Because what we are leading to is the effect of these upbringing issues, how it affects society. You're looking at boys' training school, you're looking at bodily, you're looking at other facilities, you're looking at the toll on the magistrate system, the toll on law and order, the toll on policing. All this is to make us work with each other.
And the toll on taxpayer dollars as well.
Taxpayers, yeah.
Yes.
So when you look, maybe, I do not know if such information is available, but when you look at the cost of keeping us at peace with each other, it's a tremendous cost.
I agree, Dr. Surage. You know, Dr. Gilead, we were just talking a little about the criminality. We didn't really go in depth because, you know, this is a huge, huge issue in St. Lucia right now. It's not just homicides, although that's probably the biggest challenge of all. It's all kinds of crime, okay? And we have some serious problems. Even issues with road accidents and behavior on the roads, lawlessness in general in our country, where you have people who just love to defy rules and regulations and so on, right? And another one that is really serious and deep concern for me is these homicides where you have people taking one shooter taking 3 lives simultaneously. So this is one shot, okay, killing 3 people and then walking away from that. And unless, of course, the police would catch the person, these individuals are just there in society living like quote unquote normal, right? That's at least that's the impression I get. So maybe you can go into the mind of these individuals and see what it is that they're going through and so on, right? So this is a big issue in St. Lucia. We've had double homicides, triple homicides. It goes on and on and on in our country right now. So, Dr. Gilead, can you just take us into that world and try to help us understand what's really, really going on
in their minds?
Yes.
In the mind.
Yes. And what can discuss the home as well, because we did say, Dr. Surage said the first 8 years you said, Dr. Surage?
The first 5 years.
Yeah, all that. So what are we looking at?
So like I said, the port of call is always the parent. And what I have found from my working with persons at the Borderley and Borderley Correctional Facility and the Boys Training Center, and even other persons, is that most of those persons, when you look at their childhoods, not enviable, and those persons have had childhoods that have been horrible, filled with abuse, filled with neglect, filled with a lot of anger from their parents, filled with a lot of absence from their parents, filled with parents that were substance abusers and who maybe had their personality disorders or their mental disorders. And so those children grew up in a very frightful environment, a lot of them, very frightful environment where they always were in fight or flight. So they never knew what would happen next.
Would that be the authoritarian parents style?
Yeah, it could be either of the three, but the child was just always afraid. And so that child had to cope with that environment because that child had to survive. So it's persons who have always been in survival mode. Yeah? So when I was a child, I expressed an emotion and I was beaten or I was neglected or I was punished in some way. And so as an adult, I'm always in survival mode and somebody says or does something and I snap and I'm punished again. So it's basically a revisiting of what happened as a child, and then I'm put away. And so that just perpetuates, so the anger becomes more and more. And can you believe there is no therapist at the Borderley Correctional Facility?
And that's what
no therapist.
Now, I just to add a little plug on that. When you talk about neglect, it's not only about physical neglect, not feeding you, not giving you clothes. It's emotional neglect, and that scar of emotional neglect is far deeper.
Explain emotional neglect.
So the child and what they will tell you, the persons who in the penal system, nobody ever wanted me. So I felt like I was not wanted. I felt like I was not.
And if I was not wanted, I have no value. I have no value for myself. And no matter what I do, even though I die, it don't matter because I have no value. Because I am nothing. And I have been taken to be nothing. Nobody loves me, nobody likes me. And I'm just on my own. So if you go in their mind, this is how, and that is why they can take a life with no problem. Because a life or a life, it don't matter, I can go tomorrow.
You said emotional neglect.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Emotion, denying love, denying affection, and denying reciprocation of feelings.
So can I just say it simply? The child
Please.
never felt safe.
Mhm. As Dr. Surage said.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've had a small child already, and your child, you hold the child, and the child rests his or her head on your shoulder, and you feel safe, and you feel calm, and the child feels safe as well.
Completely
So a
safe,
child
yeah.
who's never had that or had it very infrequently becomes very frightful and anxious and unsure, and if their way of coping is by lashing out, then they're going to become a violent child and a violent adult.
And earlier we spoke about the empathy issue, and I guess those children would be those who didn't see the modeling you spoke about earlier, about how the parent relates to neighbors, friends, etc., in an empathetic way. They don't see that. So could that be the reason they show no empathy towards somebody else they could just take their lives like it's nothing?
That, and when I show emotion, I am punished.
Explain.
When I cry as a child, Pahelela, what you crying for? You have nothing to cry about. If I come and tell you I love you, move by me. You understand? If I fall and I bruise my knee and I'm crying, licks. Why you fall and bruise your knee? If I steal from the pan, when you want thief a piece of meat, and I'm afraid because you catch me, licks. Because anytime I show emotion, it is punished. And so I don't need to show emotion, because emotion means weakness. So I can never show that I'm weak, because I'm not going to feel helpless like I felt when I was a child. I'm not going to feel that way anymore. So emotion equals weakness, and so empathy does not make sense to me.
Now, Dr. Gilead, when a lot of us, maybe from our when I say, well, I hope you guys are my age, I think.
Yes, we are.
We came from this sort of authoritarian background, where, as we said a while ago, everything was licks, and then this is reinforced in the school. When you go to school, it's the same thing again. It's everything for them is a licks. I was watching a video earlier today, a little boy, young boy, overweight and so on, and looks like his father. Somebody's beating the daylights out of that little boy with look like a bamboo stick or something. I mean, the boy is bawling, right? He was really letting him have it. And then the video shows you the cause of that. And what it was, the boy was at a party apparently dancing with somebody who was gay. And this is how the father, I'm just assuming it's the father, reacted to that incident. I mean, he let that boy have it. So that's the sort of environment that we kind of grew up in back in the day. From your experience, Dr. Gilead, has this changed over the years? Have we gotten any better?
It has gotten a little better, but not much. Because even just to add to what you said there, when we were growing up, the schoolwork was beaten into us as well. So you had to learn your timetables and those other things, because otherwise you get licks.
And that's a good point you're making. Every time I look at an exercise book and I see the times table, immediately remember licks. Immediately. I associate the times table with getting licks.
So you were traumatized, and you're not seeing a psychiatrist or a counselor. So you see, so imagine the other persons out here who went through similar situations. A lot of them are now parents or grandparents, and their children, maybe we put them through the same thing. And so what will happen is a perpetuation of that behavior, unless somebody decides to step in, or one of them decides to go see somebody to deal with their trauma, because unprocessed trauma is the reason for the different the other parenting styles that we saw, the authoritarian and the neglectful and so on. So unless the parent decides, I'm going to put a stop to this thing, I'm not going to perpetuate this thing to my child, then it's just going to continue. Because it's like it's a cycle. I pass it on to my child passes it on to them child. And that's why the slavery thing and all of those the traumatic situations from way back, we're still experiencing them, because nobody has decided, I'm putting a stop to this.
I need to ask you something. Why is it that the people who are involved in these crimes, why is it that they do not go to the authorities to report, for example, if a wrong was done to them, to report the wrong to the authorities? They feel that they need to deal with it by themselves. Why is that?
Because that's what they learned as children.
And the authorities take too long to get justice.
There's no justice, so I'm helpless, and this person made me feel helpless like I did. And usually when I felt helpless as a child, there was no redress, nobody had remorse for me. So I always have to take things into my own hands.
You know, the minute, say for example, I remember years ago I was driving and I crushed a chick, right? I crushed it. I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened to run across it. And I felt so bad for the rest of the night. I was just on my mind the following day. Up to now, I still feel bad about it. And I do not understand how somebody, at least that's what I was told, that they would go take somebody's life and go have a drink on it. Is that true?
Yeah, so one of my lecturers when I was at psychiatry school, I could call it, he had a theory that in order to kill somebody, you have to be mentally ill. You have to be out of your mind somehow, because you cannot be connected to yourself and kill somebody. The repercussions of that is horrible, and that's why a lot of persons who commit those acts are heavy drinkers or heavy smokers, because they're not connected to themselves. So they have to disconnect somehow from themselves and the act that they're committing.
So how do they do that? How do they disconnect? I mean,
by using substances.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and a lot of those persons actually, after the act, they experience some measure of psychosis.
Explain.
Psychosis is that they detach from reality. So they start to hear voices or become suspicious and so on.
So we think that they just go on, move on with their life like normal. You know, they can just get along, go back and sleep with their girlfriends or wives or whatever.
They don't.
So they go through some trauma.
So killing somebody is a traumatic experience.
So let me give you some statistics. Well, before I do that, do you think there is a place in the same way when a lady is pregnant, she comes and does all the prenatal investigation and prenatal checks? Should we add on to that some talks on parenting at that point? So mother and father come to the clinic, and then you do parenting, how to deal with the pregnancy, how to deal with the early birth, how to deal with the child, how to raise that child. Do you think there is a role for that in our society?
That's a loaded question. What I believe is that just telling somebody that all of those things are available without dealing with their circumstances, because it may be a mother who the father has walked out, and so she may be going through some measure of mental anguish. It may be a mother who's a teenage mother and the parent put them out, and she may be going through some mental anguish. It may be a mother who has a high-risk pregnancy and she's very fearful that she may lose the pregnancy. Maybe a mother who's on her 10th child and she doesn't want that child and is just skipping it because she doesn't believe in abortion. And she may be going through her mental anguish. So we have to look at the person's situation and not just telling them how to parent, which nobody does what people tell them to do. Because I'm sure you give people medication and they're not taking it, right? Right. So nobody does what anybody tells them to do. We provide support. So what are you going through with the pregnancy? How do you feel? What are your emotions like around the pregnancy? What support are you receiving from your partner, from your community, from your family? And how can we support you in that? And what that would involve is a lot more mental health facilities, or facilities, I guess you can call it, or persons in the health centers, in the community, who can offer that to persons, but we don't have that. That kind of.
We have a caller. We have a call.
Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm good.
I just want to ask if parental guilt is a form of trauma.
Definitely it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for calling.
Definitely it is.
Yeah. And so there's a guy called James Hackman. He got a Nobel Prize and because of his studies on the investment of early education and early upbringing and its effect. And he says that, and its effect on society. He said that to every $1 you put in the child in the first few years of their life, in terms of training, in terms of care, etc., will benefit down the line. You get about $4 to $9 in return.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have heard that, but then what it is saying, and I believe also that if we spend more time to have these Montessori schools for everybody and the proper training, the first 6 years of the child's life, if we put much more emphasis on that, we'll have less problem in society.
Yeah, and we have to look at the Scandinavian society. So those societies put a lot of emphasis on early childhood development. So early childhood development, persons believe, is just when you give birth and the child and the development starts there. Early childhood development starts from before even the woman gets pregnant. So two persons want to get pregnant. How do we provide them with support? How do we provide them with education and information about what they're going to go through and how they can support themselves and the little person that they're bringing into this world? And when that little person comes into this world, how can we as a society, because that's how, what's the saying? It takes a village to raise a child.
That's right.
How can we as a society support that and raise that child? Because that's what Sweden and those other countries have done. The community raises the child, not just the parents.
And also, when things go bad, it is the community that suffer, not only the child and the mother.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it is a time bomb that we really have to address.
You have another call, by the way.
Hello.
Hi, sir. Hi,
Good evening. Good night.
Hi, very interesting discussion. Just listening in.
Okay.
But we were speaking about parents and the child. But that child in society, I mean, continues to go through this mental anguish from what I'm understanding. And if it's not addressed, that rooted issue can play out in so many places. And I mean, we see it in crime, and the doctor would have mentioned, some instances where you see that playing off. Another angle that I want to ask, and maybe, more insight or discussion could be have around this aspect, is this person who has not dealt with their trauma, how effective can this person be in a workspace and being a leader, being a manager, and not having dealt with it? So the person is maybe not a criminal, maybe, not taking it out in society in that sense. But that person in a space where they play out the behavior, how does that, in your discussion, can you touch on that?
So there are lots of different ways to see that, and I like to, when I have a patient who comes in with an issue like that, do what I call a helicopter view with them. So we as human beings cannot say definitively that something will play out a certain way, but there are different scenarios that may play out. So somebody who is dealing with unhealed or undealt with trauma in a workplace environment can come across as a myriad of things. So that person can come across as a bully, that person can come across as an introvert, that person may have difficulties with dealing with other persons. That person may be a people pleaser. That person may be a wonderful person who is always cheerful and on the go and willing to help everybody and listening to advice and taking it, and that person may be a very sensitive person who every time he or she is criticized may feel very let down and put down and may close themselves away, or that person may come across as very brash and insecure and always screaming and shouting and insulting persons. So there are lots of other ways that person can come across, and I can't say that person will definitely be that way. That person may be an amazing leader who able to motivate persons and bring them together and let them do things. However, that person may have their little quirks. So the issue may be that the person has their trauma, But the issue may also be that somebody who's having the reaction to them also has the trauma. So that person may remind that other person of somebody from their childhood who may or may not have treated them that same exact way. So maybe that other person may have felt helpless as a child, and so seeing this person behaving that way brings back that helplessness, and they are then triggered by it. So it's two persons who have had trauma, and so what we have, I don't call it a trauma bond, but basically trauma reacting to trauma. So it's not just the manager who may have the issue, but the other person who's being affected by the behavior also has an issue. And if neither of them is dealing with their issues, then you're going to continue to have the friction. If one of them decides to deal with the issue, and that person decides that I can be present with myself and self-regulate when I'm faced with this person or this situation, then that regulation that they bring into the workplace can actually change the dynamics. And imagine if everybody else deals with their issues, which is the issue we have in St. Lucia, not too much mental health support, so then not everybody can deal with their issues. So somebody has to take the lead and decide, I'll be the bigger person. And nobody wants to be the bigger person because they feel they're being slighted by that other person, and that person feels they're being slighted by this person. And so it's just a round and round we go.
A vicious cycle, as you say.
With no resolution.
Dr. Gilead, before we end, I just want to go back to the criminal mind, because you hear it a lot. Somebody who was, maybe the police eventually caught, and either they arrested or maybe they were killed by the police or whatever the case may be. And you have parents who are devastated by the loss of their child, because they see this adult as their child. And they will often say, well, I don't know about other people, but he was good to me. So explain that if you can.
Well, as a parent's experience. So he or she was good to them, and that's what they experienced. And there's nothing more to explain because it was how they were treated by that person. So, and a lot of persons who engage in criminal acts, they may hold their parents in high regard. So I'm sure you've heard or seen persons who quick to kill somebody else if they say or do anything to their mother.
Yes.
Yeah. So that shows
mostly their mother and not
exactly.
their father.
Exactly.
That's true.
And then the problem I have with that is that a lot of those persons, I sit with them, and the amount of trauma that they went through at the hands of the mother and the amount of anger that they have towards the mother is tremendous. However, if anybody else interferes with the mother, it's
okay.
Isn't that strange behavior?
It's not. It's their way of masking their anger. So all of us walk around with masks. All of us. We show society something. Then when we're in our rooms or our homes, we let out the mask and we show our real selves. When with our partners, we show one mask. When we at work, we show another mask. When we on the line in the supermarket, another mask. We are all walking around with masks because all of us are afraid of letting other persons see who we really are.
In fact, I subscribe to a psychology magazine, and one of the things they ask is, how well do you think you know yourself? What do you think of yourself? And it's amazing how wrong you are, what you think you are and what others think you are.
Yes, and there's a little practice I do in my office with a lot of my clients. I ask them to breathe and put their hand on their chest, and in a moment of meditation, I ask them to ask themselves the question, who are you? Who am I, basically? And there was one time one patient just said her name, and I was like, yes, it's that simple. We tend to try to complicate ourselves with all kinds of titles and personalities and all kinds of other things, whereas we are simply us, human beings in flesh and blood, who put on masks.
So, Dr. Gilead, I want to ask you I think it's a very important question. So, we have these individuals who are out there who lack empathy, who will kill, double homicides, triple homicides. You have these individuals out there. You said a while ago that at Bordelais, for example, there's no counselor or Is it psychiatrist?
Same thing.
Okay, all right. In the meantime, we have a problem. How does the government or society address this problem in the meantime? What do we do? Because these people, sometimes not their fault, out there, they're doing a lot of evil and hurting people, taking lives. What are we supposed to do in the meantime?
So Andre, you see, the issue here is that we don't know what is happening. So we believe that we're still in that mentality of spare the rod and spoil the child. And so we don't know. So it's like the parent earlier on where you asked me about, and I said that we need to first sit the child down and ask why that behavior. So we don't know why the behavior is being exhibited. We know that there are gangs and all kind of thing going on, but we don't know why. So unless we know why, we will not be able to treat what is happening. So we're only treating blindly. So it's like you go to a doctor, have a headache, take 2 Panadol, the doctor has no clue or has not told you why you have the headache. They're treating the headache, but they're not treating the why.
But I'm just trying to imagine that in a practical sense, Dr. Gilead. I mean, we have scores of these people out there committing crimes and so on. How do you reach those people to ask them what's going on? It's not practical, is it?
It's not practical, but it has to start somewhere. Unless we start somewhere, we're going to continue years upon years, and crime is going to increase and going to increase. We have to start somewhere.
So as a professional, what are you recommending in terms of where we're starting?
First of all, research into what is happening in our society. How is the family system being propagated, basically? What's happening with trauma? What are our trauma statistics? What's happening in the inner cities with regards to how parents are raising children? What's happening in other aspects of the society with regards to parenting? Go to Borderley, what research is being done at Borderley? Boys Trading Center, what research is being done there? Nothing. So we just have 2 vacuums that we throw persons into and then throw them out a few years later with no remedies being offered. From that research, then we would know how much needs to be invested and into what modalities of treatment, and then we can move forward. I don't see this thing getting better in the short term, to be honest, and I believe very strongly that unless we start to invest in mental health in St. Lucia and invest heavily, that things are going to continue to look very bleak.
So are you saying to us that you don't have the ears of the authorities? Someone in your position.
Does mental health ever have the ears of the authority?
But you're asking him, and let me come to his defense.
Yes.
You're asking him about major national policy issues, what direction we are going, how we strategize for the next 15 years. That is the kind of question where we all parties and all stakeholders come to the table and develop scientifically and otherwise, develop a plan for the next 15 years.
And you cannot plan if you don't know what you're planning on.
That's right.
You have to know what you're planning on first. So there needs to be a lot of research into the mental health of the population, in my opinion. All the people you see standing under the market every day, and if you notice, the crowds are getting larger and larger every day. All of those persons are superb for research. Why are you there?
Right.
And what I'm finding is that a lot of those persons have what we call neurodevelopmental disorders. So a lot of them have autism, a lot of them have learning disabilities, a lot of them have intellectual disabilities, a lot of them have ADHD. And so they have from little been felt rejected by society. So I'm hyperactive in class and the teacher beat me or the teacher put me out, or I cannot learn because my brain in Vieux Fort whilst I in Castries, and so they beat me for not learning, or they fail me and I never went to whatever school. So our education system has to be looked at as well, because all of those things, none of these things are picked up in school. So a child is having difficulty and no support.
The fallacy we are making is that if you look at the triangle, the pyramid of needs by Maslow, but we're not even going to go there. But when you look at society and you see more cars, more progress, bigger houses, you say, we're doing good, we are improving, our society is developing. But just like a pyramid, the very top is the rich, the well-to-do and educated in the little lower bracket, middle sector, public servants, and the large base, unemployed, unemployable, poorly trained, This is what will destabilize your society. These are the group that will make sure that you have chain on your house, you have Doberman all around. So we have to be careful, because when we look at the top and think we are progressing, below the fire is boiling at the same time.
Yeah, and if you have to even look at Borderley, how many of those persons at Borderley who lived in Bonte or Cap Estate or Rodney Bay? Maybe one or two. So the great majority of them did not complete secondary school. The great majority of them didn't complete even primary school. The great majority of them come from broken homes. The great majority of them come from neighborhoods where they, from the time they know themselves, felt unsafe, and now they're being punished. So nobody is providing support, just punishment.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So you've got your head full for today.
Yes. I give us another 25 minutes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Dr.
So
Surage.
I wish to thank the listeners and those who called. We appreciate your call very much. At least you make a contribution towards the discussion, and that's what we like. Well, it's not going to be just a talk, just a lecture. It's a roundtable discussion.
And thanks for having me on, Dr. Surage and Andre.
I must compliment you, sir.
Yes.
Having heard all the problems you're hearing from people, that you have maintained your sanity.
And that's not the half of it, no? Not the half of it.
So you have the St. Lucia's mental problem on your mind, and you still maintain your calmness. That's tremendous.
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of work with myself, and I have my therapist.
Okay.
I was just about asking.
I have my therapist.
Just about asking.
I have my therapist.
Yeah. Wow.
So thank you all very much, people, and listeners and viewers. Thanks very much. Next week we'll be there again, and I wish you all the best.
So, Dr. Gilead, how do you know when you need to go see him or her?
I always need to go see him or her. Always. If I could carry her in my back pocket.
You do that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Gilead. Thank you very much for your service. And Dr. Surage, thank you for your service as well.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, you've been listening to and viewing Doctor in the House with Dr. Leonard Surage on Rev-Up St. Lucia every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you very much for listening and for viewing the program, brought to you with the compliments of La Place Salaison, Ultramart, the Labrie Cooperative Credit Union, and Tapio Hospital.
At Tapio Hospital, we operate a 24-hour emergency service for all your urgent healthcare needs. Our qualified medical specialist will be on hand to ensure that you receive the best of care. Call us at 459-2617. Tapio Hospital, where the patient safety comes first.
At Labrie Cooperative Credit Union, we have one simple goal: to help you grow. Because when you grow, possibilities expand. We're about growing wings, growing ideas, growing you. This is your time. A time when your plans and dreams fall into place. When what you thought to be impossible with our support is indeed achievable. And best of all, it's a time when you can look back and see your growth. So, on life's journey, set your goals high. We'll be with you every step of the way. And as you grow, so should your opportunities. Labrie Cooperative Credit Union. We're not a bank. We're better.
Looking for a one-stop shop for all your grocery and household needs? Look no further than Ultramart. We stock a variety of options from the world's leading brands, all at affordable prices. Whether you're looking for fresh produce, pantry staples, or household essentials, we've got you covered. And that's not all. Don't miss out on our ultra specials and promotions for a chance to win hundreds of dollars in vouchers, hampers, and special prizes. Visit any one of our 4 convenient locations today or check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page. Ultramat, your one-stop shop for all your grocery and household needs. Shop smart. Shop Ultramat.
It's delicious.
La Plaza Salazar is the true home of quality meat and deli products, selected and priced to suit every palate and pocket. We sell all cuts of meat, poultry and fish, from tasty lamb necks and succulent pork chops to lean dolphin and juicy top round steaks. Our deli items include turkey, ham, bacon, pork sausages, meat patties, chicken nuggets, deli ham and eggs, so that breakfast or that party is a breeze. And for your added convenience, we sell restaurant essentials and grocery items. So where's your next meal coming from? La Plaza Salazar, of course. La Plaza Salazar, Castries, Groselet, Beaufort, and Soufriere.
It's delicious.
Rev-Up St. Lucia is located at Unit 4, Gablewoods Mall, Sunny Acres, Castries, St. Lucia. Tune in to us at 97.1.